Hey, everybody. Welcome to DouglasNow.com's Beyond the Front Page with Robert Preston Jr. I am Robert Preston Jr. I got a couple of stories I want to go over real quickly today that we've talked about here on Douglas Now. There's some pretty lively discussions about a few of these things on our Facebook page. Talk a little bit about them, and again, give a little bit of perspective and maybe some opinions about some of these stories that we don't get into on the DouglasNow.com web page or the Facebook page. And then I want to mention something, talk for a few minutes about last week's tragic school shooting out in Texas. I want to just a few thoughts that I've had about it and kind of how I feel about where we need to go as a country and kind of what our objectives need to be moving forward with regard to keeping our kids safe. I also want to mention a little bit about the Coffee County school system and what we know about the measures that our school system is taking to keep our kids safe. And we're working on a larger story and a larger narrative about that. And I would like to, before too very long, to bring a couple of folks in from our school system to talk about what we have done as a system to make sure that our kids are in fact safe. And I'll go ahead and say that I believe that our school system has done a pretty good job. I know they've been pretty aggressive and pretty progressive moving forward over the last couple of years to ensure that our schools are as safe as possible. We're going to get to that here in just a few minutes. But one story I want to touch on, and this happened on Monday, on Memorial Day. And remember, Memorial Day is a day that we remember and honor and recognize those soldiers of our military who gave their lives in service to their country. And the American Legion Post 515 here in Douglas does a fantastic program at noon each Memorial Day where we remember those individuals from Coffee County going back to World War I who lost their lives in combat. And I want to say that there are 87 names, and this includes combat veterans. It also includes first responders, police officers, deputies who have been killed in the line of duty here in Douglas and Coffee County as well. And I want to say that there are 4 of those individuals. And one of those goes back many, many, many years to the early part of the 20th century. But I went to that program for Douglas Now. A lot of you know that we do a lot of live videos with Douglas Now, and I wanted to go and stream that program live on the Douglas Now Facebook page. Last year I went and I was unable to complete the task because my phone, I do my live videos with my phone got too hot. It overheated and it shut off. So this year I went and I took an umbrella with me and thought if I shaded my phone, would keep it out of the direct sunlight, it might be able to make it through the entire program. And it did not. We got about halfway through, same thing as we did last year, right in the crux of our keynote speaker's address. And my phone shut off. And there were a few comments, people who were watching it and commenting. Unfortunately, it rather unceremoniously ended, but I wanted to make sure that I gave the folks at the American Legion, and there were representatives from other posts there as well, but again, primarily Post 515 for what they did. It's a really neat program, and if you're in town and next Memorial Day, it would be worth your while to go. We're going to do some things next year to make sure that we cover our basis from a technological standpoint so that we can get through the entire program. What's kind of interesting, this is a little bit of a humorous aside in an otherwise solemn event. Frank Pridemore, professor at South Georgia State College, was the keynote speaker. Many of you know Frank. He is very talented, unbelievable historian, political scientist, singer. Got a tremendous array of talents, and he's an expert on a number of subjects. And he delivered the remarks yesterday, and he began. What he wanted to do is he wanted to mention the first individual, the first American killed in the Revolutionary War, and then sort of bookend that with the last person killed from Douglas and Coffee County in combat. And he asked the crowd, asked the audience if anyone knew who the first individual was. And I was sitting there thinking, I believe it's Crispus Attucks. And I want to say I remember that from like 7th, 8th grade U.S. history, but I didn't say anything. And after it was over with, I wanted to because nobody said anything. I wanted to let Frank know after he said it was, in fact, Crispus Attucks. I wanted to let Frank know, listen, I knew what it was. There were 2 or 3 of us up there saying, yeah, we both, we all knew. We were just afraid to ask. But Crispus Attucks is an interesting individual. He was killed on March 5th, 1770. He was actually killed in the Boston Massacre, and that's generally considered to be the beginning of the Revolutionary War. And there were several people killed, 5 or 6 people killed that day, and he is generally credited with being the first. He was shot twice in the chest. Now, what's interesting is that Mr. Attucks was not a white man. He was actually the son of a former slave. His father had been brought to the United States as a slave and had escaped, and he had married a Native American woman, or at least had a relationship with a Native American woman, and Crispus was the product of that relationship. And after his death, he lay in state in Faneuil Hall in Boston. However, because he was not a white man, only white citizens were allowed to lay in state in that particular building. There had to be a special law passed by the government of Massachusetts at the time to allow him to lay in state. So Crispus Attucks was notable for a number of reasons, but he was the first individual killed in the Revolutionary War. And I want to say that there is a monument to him. Seems like I remember that from American history, but you don't hear you don't hear about a lot about the early stages there of the Revolutionary War, but Mr. Pridemore mentioned him. And again, I think it's important that no one be forgotten who lost their lives in service to our country, whether it was in 1770, whether it was in 1945, or whether it was in 1968 or 2005. All right. Certainly each person who served our country has given us the opportunities that we have today. But again, you look at those who were willing to give everything and who did give everything. And they're the reason that we're here today. They're the reason that we're doing this show right now. They're the reason that we have DouglasNow.com. They're the reasons that we can openly and freely discuss the various ideas and philosophies that we have, whether they're right or wrong, whether you agree or disagree. They're the reason why our country operates the way it does. And I think, again, it's important that we never forget them. And I thought that it was very appropriate to talk about Crispus Attucks. Mr. Pridemore closed with talking about discussing Matthew Gibbs, who was the last person killed in combat here in Douglas and Coffee County. He was killed by an improvised explosive device in Iraq back in August of 2005. Left behind a young family, knew his family, knew his in-laws, knew the Gibbs family very well and his extended family. He's buried at Lone Hill Methodist Church Cemetery here in Douglas. If you want to visit his grave, go out there to Lone Hill. Lone Hill is notable for a number of reasons. One, of course, is the enormous tree that's in the cemetery. But there are also a number of historic graves and a number of unbelievable stories behind those graves that are in that cemetery. It's a historical cemetery in and of itself. But Private Gibbs's grave is very prominently featured in that cemetery. And when you pull up, if you want to go visit his grave and pay your respects, it's not hard to find. It's a pretty good sized cemetery, but you'll be able to pick his grave out very, very quickly. And again, you think about the folks who've lost their lives from Coffee County, may not have realized it was as many as it is, may have thought it would be more. I don't know. But you go back to World War I through World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and into the various conflicts in the Middle East. And then also our first responders who have lost their lives here serving directly in Coffee County. You know, it's about 87 names. And there's some familiar names on there. When you read through there, you know, folks who obviously have descendants and family members who are still alive today. It's interesting to see those names. And those names are preserved in front of the courthouse on the east side of the courthouse, looking out over Peterson Avenue. You can go by there and read those names. And again, pay your respects to those individuals that way if you would like. But again, I'm sorry that we didn't get to stream the entire event, but it was very appropriate and a very moving experience to be a part of. And if you're in town next year, you'll want to stop by. It's 30 minutes, starts at noon, over with by 12:30. They do a good job at keeping it brief. Of course, since it's outside, it's got to be brief, but they do a good job of that. And it's certainly well worth your time to participate in that. So again, thank you, American Legion, for what you do, not just with this program, but with the other events, the other programs that you have in Douglas and Coffee County that support our veterans. Another story that's gaining a little bit of traction here on Douglas Now. This is kind of an interesting story. And there's some different directions you can go with it. We posted this on Tuesday morning, but Douglas Wooten, actually from Jeff Davis County. This gets a little bit outside of our boundaries with Coffee County, but it has some, it definitely has some local interest. And we do. We're Douglas Now. We primarily cover news, sports, events in Douglas, Georgia, and Coffee County, Georgia, although we do get out a little bit with stories that have some local interest. Jeff Davis County, Bacon County, Irwin County, Ben Hill County, even up into Telfair County. We do some stories there as well. And if it's one, again, that will have some name recognition in Coffee County, we'll go as far as Appling County, Turner County, Tiff County, what have you. Atkinson County, of course, we're always, you know, our sister county. Pearson, Willacoochee, and Atkinson County are really a sister community to us. And a lot of people are related to each other in both communities. So we do get outside of our county line, and this is a similar story. Now, back a couple of years ago, Douglas Wooten, a DJ over in Jeff Davis County, known as DJ Doug, was involved in the reality show 90 Day Fiancé before the 90 days. Couple of things to mention here before we get too far along. First of all, reality TV is not reality at all. It's not real. It's not close to being real. There's very little that you could consider real and reality in reality TV. I don't watch reality TV show. If it's a reality, branded as a reality show or branded as a, one of these competition shows, American Idol, America's Got Talent, even some of the others that get more ridiculous than that, I don't watch it. Not interested. Got no desire to watch it. It's all fake. It's all contrived. It's all scripted, whether it's billed as being scripted or not. The other thing to keep in mind is that an appearance on one of these shows does not necessarily mean that you make any money whatsoever. And really, being on TV in general doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to make a lot of money. Having a hit song on the radio doesn't mean that you're going to make a lot of money. And certainly winning one of these shows does not necessarily mean that you're going to benefit financially at all. And you think about, for example, maybe the most prominent of these shows is American Idol. You think about how many seasons we've had, how many years we've had of American Idol. How many American Idol winners can you name? How many American Idol winners have gone on to have true mainstream success? And the answer is very few. There are a few that have done really, really well. There are a couple that have really taken their experiences on American Idol and turned it into a very rewarding career in the music business, in the music industry. But that is very much the minority. So anyway, Mr. Wooten had some involvement in the reality show 90 Day Fiance before the 90 days, didn't last very long on the show, did not really lead to anything. And in the aftermath of his appearance, he and 4 others, Denver L. Wooten, 18, who was Doug Wooten's son, Keegan Bennett, 39, and 32-year-old Verlydia Ivory, decided to break into a house and rob the individuals in the house. What ended up happening was someone was shot and killed. And according to the documents that we have and the story that we have, Mr. Bennett is generally considered to be the trigger man in that incident. Shot one of the residents of the home with a .410 shotgun, killed him. All ended up arrested. All ended up pleading guilty. Mr. Wooten, again, got life in prison for his involvement. And again, he's considered to be guilty of murder, even though he wasn't necessarily the trigger man, because he was there participating in that armed robbery, in that home invasion when someone was killed. What did they get out of it? $2. $2. They went through all that, ended up killing a man over $2. So no, reality TV does not necessarily mean you are going to make it. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to get any notoriety or fame out of it. In this case, what it ends up doing is landing you in prison for the rest of your life, because that is where Mr. Wooten will more than likely stay. But again, you think about how the music business works. You think about how show business works. I mean, I've had the opportunity to be on television a couple of times, and I've never gotten paid a dime for it. I've never made it. I'm talking about real TV, not streaming, not doing what we're doing now. I've had the opportunity to be on a couple of different true crime shows and never gotten anything out of it. Just the fact that I could say I did it. And that's the way a lot of this stuff is. All right. You're not going to make a whole lot of money. You're not necessarily going to have any type of even recognition, much less fame, fortune, and stardom out of being of these shows. What they really do, these shows exploit the people who are on there. And when they get what they want, when they use them up, then they just kick them to the side. And a lot of individuals end up in various states of trouble after they're on reality TV. Now, most of them don't end up getting life in prison on a murder charge, as Mr. Wooten did, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to do anything for your family or for yourself being on one of these reality TV shows. And we can see this here with what happened over in Jeff Davis County. Ribbon cutting, and this is a pretty big deal. This is a pretty big deal for our community. We put it up on Douglas Now. You can go check it out and read the full report, get the full details with how everything came about. But for those of you who have been in and around Douglas for quite some time and have been around Shirley Avenue and West Bryan Street, you've noticed been a tremendous construction project going on at the old Davis Wade Park, where the city pool was, where Davis Wade Field was, tennis courts. They've completely redone that area and have built a new pool, the Johnson Aquatic Center, named after Roger Johnson, longtime recreation director. And there is also a miracle field in place that carries the name Roper Field from City Commissioner, the late City Commissioner, Johnny Lee Roper. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the miracle field, it is a baseball field, can be used for other sports, but set up primarily as a baseball field, special surface, special dimensions. There are certain specifications that the field has to meet in order to be suited for its purpose, which is for special needs children and adults to get out and play sports and be able to compete. And it's a pretty neat facility. And Mr. Roper, Commissioner Roper, had a burden to make sure that everybody could play and everybody could compete. And I think we all know the impact that sports makes on young people. Okay. And even if you're not the next Chipper Jones, or next great NFL player, what have you, Tyreek Hill, anybody like that, you still can enjoy competing, playing sports, getting out, learning the lessons that come with sports and hard work, teamwork, setting goals, accomplishing those goals, all that go, all those life lessons that you learn in sports. Mr. Roper felt like everybody should have the opportunity to participate in those activities and learn those lessons. And he advocated for a miracle field for a long, long time. Unfortunately, Mr. Roper passed away a few years ago, was unable to see his dream come to life, but it is alive and well. The field will bear the name of Commissioner Roper, and kids and adults, it's not just children, it's special needs adults who may not have ever had the opportunity to play sports before, will now have that chance right here in Douglas and Coffee County. This is something the bigger cities have. They have it in Valdosta. You go to Warner Robins, places like that. And of course, the big metro areas have programs like this. This is a little bit unusual for a community of our size to have, and it's going to be really, really neat. And it's especially near and dear to my heart. My oldest son is special needs. He's high functioning special needs, but he is special needs, and he will get an opportunity to play. My younger son, many of you know him or familiar with him, is a pretty good little athlete and has done well playing baseball and football as he's come up. He's been able to compete from the time he was able to, all right, from the time his age was appropriate at the various levels from T-ball all the way up. My oldest son has not been able to. He did a little bit, but it became apparent early on that he would not be able to compete at the same level as other kids. So he's had to sit on the sidelines for the last 10 or 12 years and watch his brother compete. And now he'll have that opportunity. He'll be able to get out there and compete as well. So it's pretty exciting for our community in general, for my family specifically in particular, because we're going to get to do something that a lot of people take for granted. A lot of the things that so many families get to experience and are part of a part of that experience raising children, those families who are raising special needs children don't get to do that. You don't get to go to the ball games. You don't get to go to the practices. You don't get to go to the school dances. You don't get to enjoy the Sweet 16 parties. You don't get to enjoy prom. All right. Graduation is even a little bit different. We haven't gotten there yet, but we'll be there soon. But all these things that other families get to do, those who are raising special needs children don't. And this is one opportunity, one time where you can experience that. So it's going to be neat for a lot of people. It's going to be neat for the kids. It's going to be neat for the families. We've got, we've got a pretty good bit of information up about that. And we'll, of course, let people know as activities get planned on that field. But the Johnson Aquatic Center, the city pool, is going to be open this week. It's open right now. So check Douglas Now, check the Recreation Department's website, check the City of Douglas's website for times when the pool will be open. But that's pretty. Now I want to say this real quickly. I want to move on to our last topic for just a few minutes. But people have asked why we needed a city pool. I mean, the other one was fine. It held water. People could swim in it. Our swim team, the Douglas Stingrays, is one of the best recreation swim teams in the state. We've got a ton of state championships. We've got a ton of state records and of state finalists. All right. We do as well as any recreation swim team in the state. The problem is, as good as we are, we can't host a state meet. The reason you can't host a state meet is because you have to have an 8-lane pool. We don't have an 8-lane pool. The old pool was 6 lanes. And the reason you've got to have an 8-lane pool is because over the various heats in each event, of which there are many, if you've never been to a swim meet, they last all day long. But what they do is through the various heats, they cut the field to 8. And then the top 8 swim against each other in the finals. And those are those 8 swimmers are the ones who are eligible for the state championships. That's where your winners are going to come from the final 8. If you don't have an 8-lane pool, you can't have 8 of them swim against each other head to head. So, and our pool was old, and it was time to do something with it. It's to a point where you can't fix it, you can't renovate it, you just got to tear it down and start all over. And that's what we've done. So what this will do is this will put our swim team in position to host to host the state meets moving forward. So that's going to be neat. And also our swim program has been a little discombobulated the last couple of years because of COVID and because of the construction on the pool. So we get everything back to normal and back squared away the way that it used to be. And hopefully, not only will we have more state championships, but we will be able to win those state championships right here in Douglas and Coffee County. But the pool is open. You'll be able to swim in it this summer. Now, I want to mention something here for just a few minutes. And this is getting a little bit outside of my wheelhouse. But I want to talk a little bit about what happened in Texas last week. Where I believe 19 kids and 2 teachers were killed in a school shooting. And there's a lot of news, a lot of people talking, got problems with the way the police department reacted. They delayed going in. If they went in earlier, could they have saved lives? Gun control, a lot of different discussions about it. What I want to do is, first of all, I'm not going to mention the name of the shooter. We don't want to give him any more publicity than he's already gotten. When these things happen, it's almost like you can't really mourn the loss of life because you have people on both sides and right and left are guilty of this, where they will seize upon something like this and use it to forward their agenda. All right. And I don't think that's right on either side. I think what we do when we do that is we tend to lose sight of the victims. It becomes a political argument. It becomes a political discussion. It becomes a political tug of war instead of being what it should be, which is a time to mourn and reflect and honestly, objectively, look at what we can do to keep this from happening in the future. Okay. Because it does happen all too often. And every school in the United States is at risk for something like this to happen. Now, I find myself torn with what the next step is, because you're not going to find a bigger Second Amendment advocate than me. Okay. You're not going to. But at the same time, I see these types of things happen. And there's a part of me that says, well, we need to do something. We need to do something. We need to make sure this doesn't happen again. The question, of course, then becomes, well, what do you do? Now, I've been to gun shows before, and I usually make 2 observations when I'm at a gun show as I walk around and I look. And in fact, I quit going to them because it scared me a little bit. I see people who are at the gun show, and I think these people don't need to be outside without supervision, much less owning a gun. And then I see guns for sale, and I'm thinking, no person should ever own a gun. There's no need for a private citizen to have a gun like that. All right. So with that being said, right now, I don't think you should pass a law restricting gun ownership for law-abiding citizens. Now, the Second Amendment says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Okay? And those last 4 words, shall not be infringed. Shall not be infringed. That, to me, says that Congress should not pass any law restricting the right of people to protect themselves. Now, you can get lawyers involved here and you start breaking it down. What does protect themselves mean? What does shall not be infringed mean? Does it mean you pass no law? Does it mean that you pass common sense laws? Does it mean you restrict one type of gun and not restrict another type of gun? And certainly people are going to argue and advocate on both sides. I'm not an aluminum foil on the head guy, but I must confess that I don't trust our government to solve our problems. I don't trust our government to work and to operate objectively and without some type of ulterior motive. And I also realize or know that the government, once the government starts taking, it continues to take. Now, if you think we are getting close to aluminum foil on the head, think about what happened during COVID. Supposed to be a couple of weeks. Restrict our movement, restrict our economy, restrict our freedoms for just a couple of weeks. You remember flatten the curve. You remember that. What happened? Some areas of the country are still under COVID restrictions right now. It didn't last just 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month or for summer. It continues to go on. Once the government starts taking, and once the government sees that it can take, it will not stop. So what scares me when I sit here and I hear people talk about common sense gun control, we need common sense gun control. Well, there's a part of me that says I can understand that. I can go along with that. But then I think about it. What does common sense mean? Common sense to who? Common sense to me means something very different to friends of mine and lawmakers who are on the far right. It also means something different to those who are on the far left. What does common sense mean? And I tend to err on the side of, but this is one of those things where, it's almost all or nothing. You're either going to ban everything or you're going to ban nothing. All right. And I tend to lean to the side of banning nothing. And there are a couple of reasons why. One is because when I look at it practically, what is banning the lawful ownership of guns going to do? What's it going to do? We have been, however many years we've been a country, we've been able to own guns. There are guns on the streets. Okay. If you want a Revolutionary War era gun, you can find one. If you want the latest and greatest, you can find it too. If someone is determined to break the law, they're going to find a way. Right? What usually happens when laws get passed is that the law-abiding citizens are the ones who suffer. Okay. You don't pass a law without taking freedoms from someone. Okay. And whether intentional or unintentional, someone's freedoms get restricted. And if you start enacting gun control measures, who is really going to get affected, I think, are those of us who lawfully, legally own guns and don't plan on using our guns for anything nefarious. Okay. Our country works because we protect the freedoms of private citizens. It begins with the First Amendment, the right to criticize the government. And that's what the First Amendment is. The First Amendment doesn't give you the right to get on Facebook or Twitter and say whatever you want to say. All right. It gives you the right to criticize our government leaders without them throwing you in prison or worse. All right. And the or worse happens in a lot of countries to this day. Now, if the First Amendment doesn't work, if it gets infringed upon, the Second Amendment is in place to make sure that we have a recourse to defend ourselves against government overreach. Now, you think that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen in the United States. We'd like to think it wouldn't, but we're a lot closer to it happening if we as a citizenry cannot defend ourselves. So what do? So what's the answer? Again, I feel like something needs to be done. Nobody wants to turn on their computer or pick up a newspaper or turn on the radio or turn on the television and listen to another massacre like this. Nobody wants to do it. So what do you do? And I don't know. As I've thought about it, I don't know. The first thing, maybe the simplest thing to me, is to make sure that there are preventative measures in schools to make sure that shooters can't get in. And if they do get in, they're neutralized very quickly. All right. I don't think you necessarily need teachers carrying unless a teacher is retired military, retired police, law enforcement, who has some type of training. My wife's a teacher. Okay. She's a teacher at Indian Creek. I wouldn't want her having a gun in her classroom. You don't need teachers having guns in classrooms, I don't think. One thing that, I keep coming back to is why don't we have individuals in schools who are armed, whose job it is to protect the school? You already have someone inside. I'm thinking, again, retired military, retired law enforcement in a school system the size of ours, probably a group of 100 where you rotate people out where they don't have to be there at all times. Where you've got a few, you don't have to work every day, but you're dealing with retired folks here. And what comes to mind to me is having someone armed on every wing, not in every classroom, more than one, maybe on every wing. And most schools have, 5, 6 wings, the high school probably a little bit more. But you have someone on every wing. They don't have to walk around like a soldier guarding, guarding a military installation where you have a show of force with with some type of heavy weaponry, visible, pistols on the hips, things like that. You can conceal those weapons. Even a long gun can be concealed where the kids don't see it. But you have someone there who can neutralize a threat if it happens. Now, here in Coffee County, I haven't been to all of our schools, but the schools that I have been to, I feel like are pretty secure. Now, for some reason, and this may be wrong, and if it is, I apologize. But the number 28 is sticking out in my mind, and it could be. I can't imagine it being more. It may be less. But at some point, someone mentioned the number 28 in relation to Coffee High School, and as I remember the discussion, there were 28 doors that lead outside at Coffee High School. Okay. Between doors at the end of the wing, in the middle of the wings, the gym doors, the weight room doors, the office doors, you've got doors in and out of the lunchroom. It may not be 28, but it's a bunch of them. Now, the reason schools have so many doors, not just Coffee High, but other schools, is because schools are designed to get children out as quickly as possible in the event of a fire. Now, if you go back and look at the statistics, we haven't had a fire in a school. Let me back up. We have not had a fatality in a school fire in decades. I mean, going back maybe to the 1950s, 1960s, we haven't had a student fatality in a school fire in a long time. And the reason why is because schools are built to get students out, not necessarily to keep people from the outside coming in. And if you go back and think even 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, our schools were wide open. If you were a parent wanting to go see your child, you could get into any part of a school pretty easily. You didn't really have to, it wasn't that difficult. Now it's gotten more difficult, and rightly so, over the last few years. but and I don't know how you fix that moving forward. I don't know if there's a way to rethink school design, but there are a lot of reasons why you've got to get kids out in a hurry. And if you have a large school with a lot of number of kids, you're obviously going to need more doors. So the point is, there are a lot of doors to secure. There's a lot of territory, a lot of areas, and you don't want to turn your schools into a fortress necessarily, but you want to protect them and keep them safe. So as we move away from this particular shooting, I think there's a couple of things we need to do. First of all, we need to never forget those individuals who lost their lives and those officers who did go in and who did put a stop to this. Okay. And I don't want to get into the delays with the police department and all that. I mean, certainly there'll be investigations and there will be repercussions if need be, but there were a few individuals who went ahead, according to reports that I've read and you read, that went on in and were there on the scene and put their lives on the line ahead of others in order to make sure that as many kids were safe as possible. But what I hate to see is both sides politicize this and to some degree weaponize this. All right. Take the agenda out of it as much as possible, and let's stick with what will truly make a difference, not with what will accomplish some national narrative that's a plank of a political party, but will truly make a difference in the safety of our schools. And yeah, I feel pretty good about where we are with Coffee County. I know that there's some areas. I've heard people talk about the 9th grade academy because it's open, and it is. Although the school system has done a tremendous job and spent a tremendous amount of money over the years to fence that area, to block off those open spots where people can come in. You can't pass through that campus like you used to be able to. It is not an open campus like it was. I went to junior high school out there. It was wide open. You could walk up and down the halls. You do whatever you wanted to in there. You can't do that anymore. I go to Indian Creek a lot. I don't know how the other elementary schools are. Indian Creek is a fortress. Okay. I go to Coffee High School a good bit. As many times as I go to the front office, I have to present my ID. I have to tell who I'm there for. I have to go through all the steps, whether it's the first day of school or the last day of school. They're not letting anybody through those double doors unless they're absolutely certain that they're there for to see their child or there for a valid reason. So again, I know that even under those umbrellas, things can happen, but I feel like our school system has done a tremendous job in making sure our kids are safe. And we're going to talk with the school system more about that. And of course, in the wake of this incident, you know that they're going to take a look at what they're doing now. They're going to take a look at it again and see where they can shore these, any weaknesses up. But again, we'll wrap it up here in just a second, but I'm torn. I feel like we need to do something. I don't necessarily think that a gun control law is the right way to do it. I don't think that you can adequately define what common sense gun control means. All right. And no doubt that common sense, those two words, will get hijacked by both sides. And what's going to happen is you're going to have some type of law that will either be ineffective or infringe upon the rights of law-abiding citizens, or both. So one thing I don't want to do is I don't want to see people, our legislators, our lawmakers, pass a law just to say they did something. Well, we've got to do something to make people feel better, whether it works or not, and let's just put a law on the books that ultimately won't accomplish anything, because I feel like that possibly is where we're headed here as well. I would like to see there be more people on the ground in the school system, and you don't have to do it where kids don't need to come out of the hallway or other classrooms into the hallway to change classes and see people standing there with guns slung over their shoulder. Okay. But I think there does need to be individuals, multiple individuals on each campus who are there to protect the students, who are there to make sure if someone gets past the front office, if someone comes in through the back door, if someone is able to pick a lock and get in, that they're there to neutralize that threat and to do so as quickly and efficiently as possible. However, the appropriate way is not necessarily saying they need to be out there shooting people down in the hallway, but to neutralize that threat however they see fit, however is appropriate at the time. And it may be that an individual needs to be taken down. It may be that there are other ways, but you need someone there between the school and the students to protect them. That's what I would like to see. And I think it would be a lot easier to find and would cost a lot less than people think. But once again, if you start thinking about it, how much is too much? How much are the lives of our children worth? If it costs $100,000 per year, is that, how do you say that's too much? We can't do that. That's too much. We can't spend that kind of money to protect the lives of our children. I think we need to find a way. And I think that's what keeps coming to me. Again, people are going to agree, some are going to disagree, but I feel like we need to do something, but what we do needs to be effective, needs to accomplish the purpose without unduly infringing upon the rights of law-abiding citizens. And again, coming back to the last four words of the Second Amendment, shall not be infringed. Shall not be infringed. Let's put people in the school system, in each school, on the ground, protecting our students to stop a threat before any intruder has the opportunity to hurt any students. And once again, moving forward, do not forget the lives of those teachers and students who were lost out in Texas. It is a tragedy that will affect, I believe, the conversation in our country, the spirit of our country. It will affect the psyche of our country for a long time moving forward. We've seen these kinds of things happen. We've seen how the effects of these types of events linger. And that may be a subject for another day to talk about as well. How do we make them not linger? Okay. We don't give individuals the notoriety that they're seeking by, through the acts that they commit. We don't turn them into celebrities. We don't do that. So again, more things that we'll talk about moving forward. Just a few thoughts I had about that. Like yours, my heart breaks for that community in Texas, for those families, for those who have been directly affected by the loss of those students. It is something that I can't imagine. I can't fathom. I'm sure you can as well. I don't want to let any discourse, to let any debate, to let any discussion that we have moving forward take place without remembering those victims. All right. I think that is first and foremost. And then from there, then we try to decide what the best course of action is. And hopefully our lawmakers will do so with the goal in mind of truly making our schools and our community safer, not simply trying to further some type of agenda. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Again, give us feedback. We love the comments, good and bad. Let us know what we're doing good. Let us know what we're doing bad, what we need to change. And we will absolutely take that into account. We want to make this something that people enjoy watching. Once again, this is Robert Preston Jr. with DouglasNow.com. You've been watching Beyond the Front Page. We'll see you next time.